Lion Hunt, by Stephen Lake. Ted stood in his living room and looked out across his front yard. There was something yellow out there under the ash tree that was staring back at him. But he couldn't see it clearly enough to tell what it was. So he strolled over to his front door and opened it. To his complete surprise, a gigantic, hungry lion with a cockeyed, wild look in his eyes stood on his front lawn and stared at him. "What the?" he said in surprise. Just then the lion let out a sick, twisted roar and leapt at him. It flew so fast through the air that the only thought that passed through Ted's mind was the dreaded anticipation of the sudden burst of pain he would feel as teeth, claws, and lion exploded through the storm door in front of him. That was immediately replaced by the horrified thought that he was about to be eaten. He knew he would die eventually, but never as a meal for a crazed lion. However, to his complete and total surprise, when the lion hit the upper glass window of the storm door, he stopped cold and rebounded hard, as though he'd struck some kind of spandex barrier and had been thrown violently back. The lion hit the ground awkwardly, rolled, and then staggered to his feet in confusion. Ted looked at his storm door, and especially the glass upper half, and was baffled why it hadn't shattered like a grenade. By all rights the lion should have easily smashed through it. Instead, all he'd done was crack the glass. Ted quickly looked past the damaged door and towards the lion in his front yard, who was preparing to pounce again. He then realized that, while the storm door had miraculously and mysteriously held up against the first attack, it was unlikely to survive against a second. So he slammed the inner door shut, and then backed up several paces. Upon seeing this, the lion roared angrily. The crazed beast wasn't at all happy about being denied his lunch, and was making certain that everyone knew it. Ted stood there by the door and wondered if he shouldn't call the police, and warn them of the danger, or perhaps just go and find somewhere to hide. Just then he heard a noise to his left and noticed the lion standing near his picture window. It appeared to be sizing up the small draft windows along the left side in hopes that they might provide him with access to the house, and his desired meal. Namely, Ted himself. It was at this point that Ted had seen enough. He turned and went in search of his shotgun. If the lion wanted him for lunch that badly, then he would have to school it on the realities of life using the Smith & Wesson method. But, before he could grab his shotgun, the lion leapt at the vent window. However, just as with the storm door, the lion hit the screen and bounced off it like a trampoline. Ted was beginning to wonder what kind of lion could be as big as it was, and yet so easily repelled by such an obviously flimsy obstacle. Deciding to contemplate this at another time, he rushed into the back room, grabbed his shotgun and some spare shells, and quickly loaded it. In an odd way, he felt like a big game hunter ready to take down some giant ferocious beast in the jungle. He grinned as he kinda was in a way. The only thing missing now was the jungle. He racked the shotgun, and then strolled to the front door, fully expecting to see the lion ready to leap at him at any moment. But instead he found his front yard full of people. As he stepped out onto his porch, he looked at them in amazement. "You do realize there's a lion on the prowl around here, don't you?" he asked. One of the nearby men nodded. "Yep. Saw him head that way. Crazy-looking beast, wasn't he said. "Yeah, he tried to jump through my storm door and eat me." "Ah, is that what happened to y'all's door there?" Ted nodded. "Yeah, it is." "Do you know which way he went?" "He went off yonder, that way," said the man, pointing towards the side of the house. Ted nodded. "Thanks. And while you're at it, could you call the sheriff? I think he'll want to know about that lion before anyone else gets hurt." The man tipped his hat and smiled. "I reckon I could. Now you be careful out there, you hear?" Ted smirked. "That's why I'm packing," he quipped. He then turned and ran around the side of the house in search of the lion. The man watched him go and grinned. He soon transformed into the crazed lion and grinned slyly as the crowd around him shimmered and disappeared. "And I reckon you'll make a very tasty meal," said the lion. He then licked his lips, tossed his mane slightly, and trotted around the corner after his dinner. However, what he found as he turned the corner surprised him. Standing there, shotgun to his shoulder, was Ted. "Oh, bother," said the lion anxiously. Without hesitating 1 second, Ted emptied 3 inches of double-aught buckshot into the lion's face, sending it tumbling head over heels backwards. Seeing that the lion was now on the ground, Ted racked the shotgun, sending the spent casing dancing through the air, before aiming at the great and prideful beast again. "Y'all think I'm stupid enough to fall for that whole neighbors in the front yard trick, eh?" "Trust me, son, I wasn't born yesterday," said Ted. However, to his complete surprise, the lion soon stirred, climbed to his feet, and seemed to brush away the double-aught buckshot from his face. "Why did you shoot me?" "That hurt," protested the lion. "How the heck are you still alive?" cried Ted. He then blasted the lion a second time, but ended up with the same result. "What the heck am I doing?" "Shooting carnival rounds," he exclaimed. The lion rubbed his face as he again climbed to his feet, and then frowned at Ted. "Believe me, I wish you were," he retorted. He then leapt at Ted again. This time, though, he ducked under the blast, and then pounced on Ted before he could chamber another round. However, instead of claws and teeth rending human flesh, the lion bounced off Ted like he were a gigantic parade balloon. The lion again recovered his feet and looked at Ted in disbelief. The two then stared in confusion at each other for several moments. "Well, this is awkward," said the lion. Not sure what to do, Ted lowered his shotgun and stared at the lion. "What exactly are you made of?" he asked. The lion cocked an eyebrow. "I would ask you the same question," he replied. Ted then pondered this for several moments. None of this made any sense. He then walked over to his house and punched the siding. To his surprise, it was like hitting an inflatable bouncy house. He then poked at himself, and found that he felt like an inflatable punching dummy. "This is different," he replied. The lion looked at him in confusion. "What are you doing?" he asked with great puzzlement. Ted looked at the lion with perplexity. "I don't know what to make of this, but I don't think we can hurt each other," he said. The lion looked at Ted in disbelief, not willing to accept what he'd just heard. He then began to grin slyly. "If such is true, how about we test that theory?" he asked. He then leapt at Ted, but was surprised when he didn't shoot, or dodge, or anything like that. Ted just put his arm out, which the lion happily chomped down on. However, to the lion's surprise, instead of his teeth meeting human flesh, it was like he'd just bit into a rubbery chew toy. Ted's arm even let out a rubbery squeak when he did. The lion soon let go of Ted's arm, backed up slightly, and then sniffed at the place he'd just bitten. To his amazement, all he smelled was something akin to a wet, slobber-covered chew toy. He then looked at Ted in confused disbelief before sitting down and studying him acutely. It would seem that we have come to a rather strange and troublesome impasse," he said. Ted grinned. "I don't think it's much of an impasse so long as you can't eat me," he replied. The lion frowned at him. "Yes, but that leaves me without a meal and a still empty stomach," he said. Ted rested his shotgun on his shoulder and smiled at the lion. "Well then, why don't you come inside and sit down with me for a while? Since you can't eat me, maybe we can come up with something that you can so that you don't leave here hungry." "You okay with that?" he asked. The lion looked at him in deep contemplation as he considered his options. He really wanted to eat Ted. But even a bowl of bean soup was better than nothing. "Very well, then, I shall take you up on your offer," he replied. The two then went inside. The next thing he knew, Ted awoke in his bed with a start, and found his toiger cat resting on his arms, sound asleep, and apparently dreaming about hunting for prey like his larger savanna cousin. He smiled at the little cat, and gave it a gentle stroke of its fur, causing it to stretch, and then hug its small, human-shaped chew toy before relaxing again and going back to sleep. Ted then got up, and headed downstairs to fix himself a cup of coffee while the cat continued to sleep in his bed. He was thankful that it had only been a dream. But he wondered what had caused him to dream something like that. As he quietly pondered this over a cup of joe, his cat awoke again, and stared out the bedroom door in Ted's direction. He then hugged his human-shaped toy, chewed lightly on one of its arms, and began to quickly drift back to sleep. Someday, my chewy friend, someday, he thought. The end.